our special
members
guest.
only. It's a dating site for people that have that
Oh,
common interest.
A growing hemp.
Cool.
No, people that smoke it or share the same like of it.
So
Okay.
just to
We'll
set this
chat.
up, we have a lot of people here, so feel free to break out and have a little huddle kind of in the corner with anyone. You don't have to listen to the talk. It'll be streamed to Twitch. You're free to do whatever you want, but we're going to do a little interview here and then a Q&A and break out into a chat. So Mike, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, I really appreciate you popping in here. We're excited to get your perspective. You want to just start with kind of an elevator pitch of who you are and what y'all do?
Sure. So I work level in VR. So, for example, if you want to be a carpenter and you need to learn how to use a circular saw, you do that simulated in VR, and then they can take that skill and transfer it into the real world. And once we do that and kind of put it into storyboards, they get sent off to our development vendors and the simulations.
That's awesome. I think I can already tell, you represent a unique perspective in our community because I don't think we've talked to any instructional designers before. We've talked to a lot of folks that do learning, but none that come from that viewpoint. Can you tell us more about your background in instructional design, how you learned that skill set and how you go about it?
Sure. So I actually started as a blogger at Make Magazine. So did a lot of like tech tutorials, physical computing, Arduino type stuff, and then transitioned into instructional design from that, which instructional design is largely just how to educate people who are generally adult learners. So I, have worked in the power sector. I worked at Apple for a while doing tutorials, and I worked at a location-based VR company called Nomadic a couple of years ago. And yeah, so the interesting thing is that there are a lot of instructional designers generally design for training or doing PowerPoints or doing e-learning, which I'm sure a lot of you have experienced. So we're really creating essentially a new type of profession, which is like taking the rigor of instructional design to make sure that people can learn and master different topics and applying it to VR design.
That's really cool. What do you see as being the big advantages in terms of the learning process of VR?
Well, I mean, I think most people can agree that the best way to learn something is to experience it, right? And a lot of times folks don't have access to the tools and places that they need in order to learn something through experience. Especially in the time of COVID right now, like if you wanted to learn to be a mechanic, you can't even get into the garage at a technical school. So we really provide that. In addition, like even if you could, sometimes things are just impossible. Like say you needed to learn how to repair a piece of machinery that's worth tens of thousands of dollars or something like that. Well, you can't just do that like with 20 people and break something in real life and then fix it again and again and again. But if you can recreate it in VR and show folks how to do it, then it only takes the cost of an Oculus headset for every person that you want to learn it.
Sure, that's fascinating. And we've had, we've had some other training folks come in here and touch on this concept, which is that, the immersion and the costs and all these things are great of instructional design, but one of the things that gets overlooked in terms of the benefits of VR is the feedback time, basically like how quickly we can correct bad decisions and bad actions. Is that something that plays a part in your instructional design?
Yeah, do you mean sort of in terms of safety? I could talk about safety.
Sure. Well, I mean, the one example that kind of brought it up for us last time was an example we heard from ESPN, in that when they're training NFL quarterbacks, one of the things that the coaches appreciate the most is that in VR, when you make a bad decision, we can tell you immediately, within a fraction of a second, instead of having to, replay that afterwards and revisit it. And they show that that's a lot more effective. Is that something you see?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I think it's done in a bit of a different way. Like so with us, it's more that say you're learning how to do a particular skill and you're at this one step where you're really getting stuck, right? And you're just not getting it right. Well, we can then kind of shoot you back to a previous time in that simulation where you learned it for the first time and you get review. So like you would have scaffolding for that, and then you'd get popped back in to where you were before, and then you can do it successfully. So yeah, in terms of that type of feedback, yes, it very much, it mimics like individualized instruction in VR, so that instead of where once this may be in a classroom of like 25 or 30 people and the teacher's attention is divided in 25 or 30 different ways, you have a coach who's helping you immediately and individually.
Gotcha. I mean, that's a huge advantage. For people that are kind of watching the stream and they're interested in getting into this kind of thing, but they maybe don't have the skills yet that you have, what's the best path to developing that skill set?
I would say so for the best path for developing an instructional design skill set is to, read up on the topic, and then if you'd really like to break into the profession, I would choose a project that say a friend is doing, say on GitHub or something, or a process that you think that you can show somebody how how to learn it, and then start developing a portfolio based on that. I'd also say that for the VR component, really be intimate with how VR works, how VR controls work. You don't need, like, I don't know Unity, I don't know Unreal, but I understand how the mechanics work within VR, and be able to prove that you can say write a spec or a storyboard for how you might teach something in VR.
Kind of, so I think we have a lot of people here. We're gonna have a lot of good questions from the crowd, so I'll just ask a couple more. But has there been a specific topic or piece of knowledge that you've always been excited about learning in VR? For me, like watching The Matrix as a kid, that kung fu scene, right? That always stuck with me. Is there something like that for you?
Yeah, I think I would love to learn how to weld in VR. I think that there are some folks who have kind of who already have some products like that. I think that would be super exciting. Working at height on a scaffold would be amazing, and doing the all the proper safety procedures with that would be fun. Essentially anything that you would not have normal everyday access to, but would be a real world skill, would be a lot of fun to learn in VR.
Maybe juggling knives or something like that.
It's funny because I actually do know how to juggle. Maybe that'd be a great way to practice. my next skill
your website, and it looks like you have a testimonial. I think it's from, it looks like an industrial power company. And I'm just curious how you guys go about, starting those conversations with folks. How do you find those deals?
So yeah, a lot of market research is done sort of to identify what skills are needed the most for young folks who want to get jobs, and then we partner with various institutions to do that, and we have a whole sales team that finds those folks, and then when it looks like they may want to do something with us, we talk about what their needs are, and then we say, like, hey, like, what kind of stuff is going to have the most impact in VR? So I mean, like, I'll be honest, like sometimes topics, they're not that hands-on and it doesn't make sense to do it in VR. It's not the right medium, but we try to identify that and then move forward with it.
Awesome. All right, someone in the crowd want to ask a question?
Yeah, I have a question. You talked a bit about the different types of experiences. It sounds like you have a lot of experience with different learning scenarios and different reasons to learn in VR. Are there any specific things that you think work really well, apart from like the obvious £1,000,000 things that are going to break or stuff like that? Are there any kind of processes or things that you can learn in VR that work better than others?
That's a good question. I would say anything that can be. We're a little stymied by having controllers instead of hands still, right? Hand tracking is kind of not up to prime time yet. I think we all know that. So anything that involves handheld tools that require like fairly simple controls, but you can do like complex processes with them tend to work out really well. So like changing the brakes on a car, right? Or learning how to use a hammer drill or like a reciprocating saw or something like that. In terms of the hands-on component, they end up translating really well. Like we don't have to take as many shortcuts in order to get it into the real world. So those are just a few examples.
Thanks.
May I have a question shortly? Over here, one on the PC. Sorry. um, do you think maybe that also standard, let's call it workflows, like working in an office? Do you think that there would be a chance to have a good teaching in VR for that? That is not boring, that gives you more possibilities? Or do you think it's much better for things that are working with machinery and stuff like that?
I think there are certainly possibilities, and it would probably be scenario dependent. Like I could probably think of some things that would happen in an office where VR training would be good for that. Uh, I will tell you that we do have a hospitality soft skills module for like for working in a hotel.
Oh yeah.
So in terms of soft skills, like it definitely works with that. But yeah, I'd say there could be some possibilities.
Right, thanks.
Hello. I have a question. The first thing that comes to mind for me is, could someone on the artistic scale show us their unique way of doing things with this VR training? Could we go into that realm on someone on the artistic spectrum?
I'm sorry, did you say artistic or autistic?
Autistic spectrum, yes.
Okay. Yeah. I know that I've certainly read and seen some video about that. I think that there's probably potential for what we do to be a more receptive learning modality for someone on the autistic spectrum. We haven't personally done any research into it yet, but I would certainly be curious to know you know how that would work, or to do some research on how those things would work. For sure.
Thank you.
I gotta step out for a little bit. Okay, I'll be back in like 45 minutes or so. Okay.
Yeah, well, welcome to the community, man. Thanks, I appreciate it.
I'll ask one. I'm curious how, instructional design for VR is a fairly new field, but I'm sure it pulls on, pulls from all these legacy fields. What's the overlap between what you do and neuroscience? And do you keep yourself educated on neuroscience as part of your job?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have several folks on the team who are very well versed in adult learning theory, and neuroscience plays a big part of that. And yeah, like we are definitely sort of in uncharted territory in terms of what the impact of this training has for people. I mean, we always talk about like visual learners or audio learners. So like now we have like kinesthetic, tactile, you know, all, like all these different sensations that we can utilize to reinforce training for people, and we're doing our best to implement those for sure.
What was this whole commotion about?
And do you find that there's strong ties to your field and research institutions?
Speaking and everybody was listening. I was wondering if you do anything.
Yeah, there are actually. I mean, I think that for a long while, like VR in education was almost exclusively being used in educational institutions. You know, I think that it's only been fairly recently that the tech has gotten good enough and has gotten affordable enough that this can be done, you know, in a commercial way. But yeah, I mean, I'm constantly on the lookout for, you know, other folks who are doing things in this field, and I've come across a lot of papers. That's for sure.
Sorry, I feel like we've been too loud. Do you want to come over here where they can't hear us?
Did you find any interactions that you expected to work well in VR? Any trainings, but they simply didn't work? Were you surprised by some training set or?
Interesting question. So we needed to do a simulation on manual lifting, and I designed something to lift a tire. So you had to crouch down, grab the tire with both controllers, stand up, turn around, and then put it down. And I thought to myself, like, oh, like this will be, you know, this will be a sim shit, no problem. We have to detect the height of the headset, right? We have to confirm that when they crouch, it's within a range that we're going to, you know, sense that they are actually crouching, and you know, you don't have any feet and legs. So, and then you have to do a two-handed grab, which can be sort of, it can get kind of floaty if you've ever done like a two-handed grab on something. So while you're turning, you could easily just drop it on accident. And we had to, at the same time, be testing for proper form and technique during this. So I would say we ended up pulling it off and it worked. But it ended up being like a lot more complex, and I had to have a lot more conversations with developers and, you know, testing to get it to really work right.
Thanks.
Sure.
How big of a leap forward do you anticipate eye tracking is going to be?
Oh wow. Honestly, like it hasn't even been on my radar. In terms of a leap forward, I always think about hand tracking as being as being the big one. And this is, and I guess this is probably specific to what we do, right? You know, that like that you would be able to say pinch something with your thumb and forefinger, because that's how you would actually do it in the real world, or you know, like that sort of thing. To have that real degree of specificity would just open us up uh, to being able to teach even better and even more topics. So.
Well, since I know we have a couple of music apps, you know, Robin from Grand Rowdy's here. We've had Tribe XR. They do DJ instruction. Do you have thoughts about training for music?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I actually happened to be a musician when I was a younger man. I did it full time. Uh, you know, I think that there's a lot of potential for it. I've seen some great apps for it. You know, I think that uh, you know, if you, it may not. We sort of have to think. You know, this is an interesting time because more young people today are learning how to do music in a DAW than like by playing a guitar or something like that. So I think that we'd have to get away from thinking about like how to learn guitar or how to learn violin or something like that, and start to imagine you know, that maybe you can have like your entire environment as your instrument, you know, or you can manipulate it in any way that you want. You know, and I think that this is sort of indicative of the overall blue skies phenomena that we're seeing with VR right now, which is that we are actively every day learning how to use this medium in different ways. And you know, it's almost like when people first released apps when smartphones came out. You know, it was just like all kinds of different stuff, and everything was super cool. And then it kind of like settled into its own silos, right? Or we're still in that super cool phase. So yeah, I'm excited to see what other music and art apps are going to be released.
What
It's
do
really
you think is going to
interesting.
be the next big thing for VR? Do you think it's going to be e-commerce, or do you think it'll be something in learning?
I think it's going to be something in learning. You know, I think that we're existing at a very interesting time as a company. You know, we were founded pre-COVID, but through COVID, uh, we've come to find that we're a very unique and interesting alternative to other types of distance learning. And I think what is happening right now, and I mean, my sister is a high school math teacher, and all, you know, all the folks at her schools and at schools across the country are learning how to do distance learning, right? They're becoming experts in how to do a class in Zoom. Um, and you know, once the vaccine is here and hopefully we all get back to normal, it's not like those skills that folks acquired went away, or like, and it's not that like those habits will go away, right? So we may see that a blended learning type of situation will continue to persist even afterwards. So this, in terms of education, this may be a tidal shift that is going to, you know, just revolutionize the way that we teach people, and I'm glad that we're a part of that.
That's awesome.
Sorry, I have a quick question for you. Just you mentioned that you don't have any specific experience in Unity or in development in general. I don't know where you are in your organizational role, but do you find that is challenging in a startup environment, and how do you deal with it?
Is I've worked with the folks on the development side of our company to essentially come up with a shared language. So, you know, and we know our roles. Like, you know, I know that a developer at my company is not going to be versed in learning theory or about design or, you know, teaching folks, and like that's fine because I've got it covered. But they know enough that we can talk about it, right? And like at the same time, it's like I know that I can say something like, hey, this hitbox needs to be bigger, right? Or, you know, or like getting occlusion or something like that. So, you know, I think that there is a a, a certain amount that you can learn, and this really cuts across any discipline, really, where you can learn enough about what somebody else does, and that is, you know, I think what we've achieved.
Thank you.
Do you guys use haptics? And like if so, how important do you think it is for the learning experience? Like that feedback, like physical feedback?
Yeah, I think it's really important. We generally use them to mimic a real world situation. So, like if you use a power tool, as soon as you switch it on, you get the haptic feedback. You know, um, uh, or it can be to alert you of something, that there's danger. You know, if sometimes we work with electricity in our training sims, and if you touch the wrong wire, you'll get zzz, you know. So it works really well with that, and that's sort of like what I was talking about earlier, which is that, you know, folks are going to remember that. Like our trainees, they remember that when we get feedback from them. And, you know, that means that we have sort of like planted that kernel in their head that, wow, like when my hands are vibrating, it means I'm holding a dangerous tool, or if I touch the wrong wire, I'm going to get zapped. You know, it's so much more impactful to say for them to experience that than to have somebody tell them that.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate you coming on here and giving us your perspective, and that was really interesting.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for the questions. Much appreciated. Great community.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, let's feel free to mingle and continue chatting with folks. If anyone else has questions, feel free to ask them directly. And by the way, guys, every week I make a joke that this week I hope we break alt space for the first time by reaching our user limit. And during that talk, we finally did max out our room at 30 concurrent users. So thank you so much for everyone who's been coming back. I think I see more familiar returning faces here than I have at any other event. So I think all of us are kind of working together to make this a really special community, and we got a lot in store. We're just getting started.
Congratulations.
All right.
Congrats.